What happens when your own child cancels you from Christmas morning like an inconvenience? By 8 a.m., after reading a single text from my daughter, I packed a bag and disappeared from their lives without a word. They thought I was sulking. They never imagined where I was going, or what I was quietly setting in motion. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the hype button, and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? The text arrived at 7:47 a.m. on Christmas morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips, when my phone buzzed against the granite countertop. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind pressing against the windows. Outside, snow had started to fall during the night, light flurries that clung to the bare branches of the oak tree in the front yard. I had been awake since 5, the way I always was. Old habits from decades in the oil fields, where daylight meant money and delays meant catastrophe. I set down the mug and picked up the phone. "Hey, Dad, change of plans. We're doing Christmas breakfast at Mom Jenna's. She's got the whole spread planned, and honestly, it just makes more sense logistically. We'll catch up with you next week, maybe. Merry Christmas." I read it twice, then a third time, then a fourth, searching for something I must have missed. An apology, a hint of regret, some acknowledgement that this mattered. Nothing. No, sorry for the last-minute notice. No, we'll make it up to you. No, I know this is disappointing. Just a cheerful dismissal, packaged with an emoji I didn't recognize and a period that felt more final than any punctuation should. I looked at the dining table. 3 place settings. The good china my late wife Ellen had insisted we keep for special occasions, the plates with the gold rim that we'd received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. I'd set it out last night, the way I always did. Cloth napkins folded the way Ellen taught me, crisp triangles that stood at attention beside each fork. A small centerpiece of winter greens I'd picked up from the grocery store because I thought my daughter might like it. She used to love evergreen branches when she was little, the way they smelled like Christmas and forests and winter air. My granddaughter Kara was supposed to sit in the chair closest to the window. She liked watching the birds at the feeder. I'd filled it yesterday, made sure there was extra seed because I wanted her to see the cardinals. She always loved the cardinals, their bright red feathers against the snow, the way they hopped from branch to branch, fearless and vivid. Last time she was here, 3 weeks ago, she'd pressed her nose against the glass and counted 7 of them. 7, she'd told me solemnly, was her lucky number. I'd bought a book about birds to give her today, a field guide with beautiful illustrations. I thought she might like learning their names. I typed out a response. "That's fine. Have a good time." Deleted it. Typed another. "Okay. See you next week." Deleted that too. Tried again. "I understand. Enjoy your morning." Stared at it. Deleted it. Finally, I wrote nothing. I walked to the bedroom and pulled my old duffel bag from the closet, the leather one with my initials stamped near the zipper, a gift from Ellen on our 20th anniversary. It still smelled faintly of oil and dust, the residue of 100 worksite trips across Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, places where I'd made my name, built my reputation, earned respect that seemed to matter less and less the older I got, places where people listened when I talked, where my word carried weight, where I was someone. I packed methodically. 2 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, socks, toiletries, my laptop, a folder of documents I kept in the top drawer of my dresser, papers most people wouldn't think to save, contracts, agreements, correspondence that went back years, things I'd accumulated without ever discussing them with anyone because they'd never asked. The presents I'd wrapped stayed under the tree. A doll for Kara, the kind with the historical outfits she'd been asking for since October. American Girl, they were called. I'd gone to 3 different stores to find the right one, the one with the dark hair like hers. A cashmere scarf for my daughter, deep blue because that was her color, the shade that made her eyes stand out, the color Ellen used to say made her look like royalty. A set of precision tools for my son-in-law Bradley because he'd mentioned once, in passing, at a barbecue 6 months ago, that he liked working on vintage motorcycles. I'd spent 3 weeks tracking down the exact set, calling specialty shops across 2 states, checking online forums, comparing prices and reviews, making sure I got the German-made ones because those were the best. I left them there, ribbons gleaming under the colored lights. The tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated the way Ellen and I used to do it together. White lights, no colored ones, glass ornaments, some of them older than my daughter, a gold star on top that had been in Ellen's family for 3 generations. My phone buzzed again as I zipped the bag. Not a text this time, a notification, Instagram, Facebook. I didn't use either one much, but I kept the apps because my daughter posted photos of Kara there. And sometimes it was the only way I saw what was happening in their lives. The birthday parties I wasn't invited to. The weekend trips I didn't know about until after they'd happened. The moments I'd been edited out of. I opened Instagram. The first image was my daughter, her husband, and Kara, all dressed in matching red and white pajamas, seated around a table overflowing with pastries, fruit, and what looked like champagne flutes filled with mimosas. The mother-in-law, Jenna, stood behind them, one hand on Bradley's shoulder, smiling like she'd orchestrated something magnificent. Like this was her masterpiece. The table was set with fine china, crystal glasses, silver candlesticks. Everything looked expensive and perfect. The caption read, "Best Christmas morning ever. So grateful for family traditions. Blessed, Ducker family first, darn Christmas morning." Posted 6 minutes ago. They hadn't even waited until noon. Hadn't even pretended to feel bad. Hadn't even thought about whether I might see this. Might wonder why I wasn't there. Might feel the sting of being replaced so completely and casually. I stared at the image, at my granddaughter's face, lit up with joy, her mouth open mid-laugh at something someone had said, at my daughter's smile, genuine and untroubled, her arm around Kara, her head tilted toward Bradley in that affectionate way couples do when they're completely comfortable, at Bradley, looking comfortable and content in a way that suggested this was exactly where he wanted to be, exactly the family he'd always imagined, at Jenna presiding over it all like a queen surveying her kingdom. I wasn't in the frame, not even in spirit, not even as an afterthought. Not even as a small absence they might have acknowledged with a "wish Dad could be here" in the caption. Nothing. I locked the phone, slid it into my pocket, and picked up my bag. I walked through the house one more time, the kitchen where Ellen and I had cooked 1,000 meals together, the living room where we'd raised our daughter, watched her grow from a baby to a woman, the hallway lined with photographs, most of them from before Ellen got sick, family vacations, birthday parties, graduations, moments when we'd been happy, when we'd been whole. I stopped at one photo, my daughter's wedding day. She was standing between Bradley and me, her arms around both of us, her smile radiant. I remembered that day. How beautiful she'd looked. How proud I'd been. How I'd walked her down the aisle and handed her over to Bradley, trusting him to take care of her, to love her the way she deserved. I'd worn my best suit that day, given a toast that made people laugh and cry, danced with her to Unforgettable, the song Ellen and I had danced to at our own wedding, 6 years ago. Had I been disappearing even then? Had it already started? The front door clicked shut behind me at 8:11 a.m. I didn't leave a note. The highway stretched empty and gray under a sky the color of old concrete. I drove north, no destination in mind yet, just movement, distance, the need to be somewhere that wasn't here, wasn't this life, wasn't this version of myself that had become so easy to ignore. Snow fell intermittently, light enough that I didn't need the wipers on full. The road was clear, salted overnight by the highway department. A few other cars passed going the opposite direction, probably families heading to Christmas gatherings, trunks full of presents, children strapped into car seats in the back. The radio played Christmas music, Bing Crosby dreaming of white Christmases, Mariah Carey hitting notes that seemed to mock the silence of my car. Some modern song I didn't recognize, all synthesizers and auto-tuned vocals. I turned it off after the third song. The quiet was better, cleaner, more honest. It wasn't the first time I'd been erased. That had started years ago, so gradually I didn't notice until it was already routine, already established as the way things were. Birthdays where I arrived to find the cake already cut, the candles already blown out, because we started early, Dad, you know how kids are. School events where I was told the wrong time, or the right time, but the wrong location, and by the time I arrived, the play was over and Kara was already in the car heading to pizza with the family. Jenna's family. Always Jenna's family. My daughter married Bradley 6 years ago. The wedding was at Jenna's estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a view of the hills. Everything was white and gold, elegant, expensive, the kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines. I paid for half of it, though you wouldn't know that from the speeches. Jenna talked about how blessed they were, how beautiful her son had turned out, how proud she was to welcome my daughter into their family. She thanked the wedding planner, the florist, the caterer. She thanked the string quartet and the photographer and the venue coordinator. She didn't thank me. I sat in the third row. Not the first, not the second, the third. Behind Bradley's siblings and their spouses. Behind Jenna's sister and brother-in-law. Behind people I'd never met. Bradley was confident, good-looking, the kind of man who commanded a room without trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile and a firm handshake. He worked in medical device sales, made decent money, and came from a family that had more, much more. Jenna, his mother, was a force, the kind of woman who hosted charity galas and sat on nonprofit boards and made sure everyone knew it. She wore her wealth like armor, spoke with the certainty of someone who'd never been told no, never been contradicted, never been made to feel small. I liked Bradley at first. He seemed solid, respectful. He called me sir for the first year, asked my opinion on things, seemed genuinely interested in my work. We'd have conversations about engineering, about problem solving, about the satisfaction of building something that worked. He'd ask questions, listen to the answers, nod thoughtfully. But over time, I started to notice things. The way he deferred to his mother on every major decision, the way he spoke over me at dinner, not maliciously, just as though my opinion didn't register, didn't matter, didn't warrant acknowledgement. The way my daughter began to mirror his tone when she talked to me. Dad, you're so quiet. You need to be more engaged. People can't read your mind. Dad, Bradley's parents are taking us to Napa for the weekend. I know you're not really into wine, so we didn't think you'd want to come. You'd probably be bored anyway. Dad, we're doing Thanksgiving at the estate this year. It's just easier with the kids. You understand, right? It's a lot of work to host, and Jenna has staff. Kara was the only grandchild. Jenna had 4 other children, none of them married, none of them with kids yet. So Kara became the center of her world, the crown jewel of her legacy, the heir apparent to whatever dynasty Jenna imagined she was building. And my daughter let it happen. Encouraged it, even. She started dressing Kara in outfits Jenna picked out, expensive dresses with matching shoes and hair ribbons, started planning weekends around Jenna's schedule, Jenna's preferences, Jenna's expectations, started speaking in that same clipped, confident tone that Jenna used when she wanted something done. I became optional, the spare, the backup, the man they called when they needed something, then forgot about until the next emergency. I paid for things, quietly. A new roof when theirs started leaking 2 years ago, and their insurance didn't cover it all. $15,000 I transferred without hesitation, without asking questions. Because that's what family does. Kara's preschool tuition when Bradley's commission checks dried up during a slow quarter, and they were short 3 months in a row. The down payment on their second car when the lease on the old one expired, and they were short $5,000 they hadn't budgeted for. I never made a big deal about it, never asked for credit, never mentioned it again after the check cleared. That wasn't how I was raised. My father taught me that you help family because it's the right thing to do, not because you want recognition, not because you want gratitude, not because you're keeping score, but I noticed I was never mentioned, never thanked in front of others, never acknowledged as someone who'd contributed, who'd helped, who'd made things possible. Thought I was the emergency contact, the fallback plan, the man they called when they needed something fixed or funded. But I wasn't part of the story they told about themselves. I wasn't part of the narrative they'd constructed about their perfect life, their blessed family, their wonderful support system. At Kara's 4th birthday party, Jenna gave a speech. She stood in the center of the backyard, champagne glass in hand, and talked about how blessed they all were, how grateful she was to have such a beautiful granddaughter, how proud she was of Bradley and my daughter for building such a wonderful life together. She thanked the caterer, thanked the venue, thanked the event planner who'd coordinated the whole thing, thanked everyone who'd brought gifts. She went on for 5 minutes, listing names, expressing gratitude, making eye contact with person after person around the yard. She didn't mention me once. I'd paid for half the party. My daughter knew it. Bradley knew it. But when Jenna spoke, it was as if I didn't exist, as if I hadn't contributed, as if I was just another guest who'd shown up with a present. My daughter hugged her afterward, told her it was a beautiful speech, told her how much it meant to have her support. I left early, told them I wasn't feeling well. No one tried to stop me. No one noticed I was gone. I stopped at a gas station an hour outside the city, the kind of place with flickering fluorescent lights and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since yesterday. I poured a cup anyway and sat in a booth by the window. The vinyl was cracked, repaired with duct tape. The table was sticky. Outside, a few other cars were parked by the pumps, people filling tanks, buying lottery tickets, stretching their legs on long drives to somewhere else. A family walked in. Father, mother, 2 kids. The father was carrying a little girl on his shoulders, and she was laughing, her hands tangled in his hair, bouncing with each step he took. The mother smiled at him, squeezed his arm, said something that made him laugh too. They looked happy, complete, connected, the kind of family I used to have. I looked away. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. Dad, are you okay? You didn't respond earlier. Call me when you get a chance. I stared at it. Tried to imagine what she thought was happening. Probably figured I was hurt, sitting at home in my quiet house, waiting for an apology that would make this okay. Maybe she'd call later, after the breakfast was done, after the presents were opened, after Jenna had taken enough photos to fill an album. Maybe she'd stop by tomorrow with Kara, let the kid give me a hug, hand me some leftover pastries, and everything would reset to normal. But normal was the problem. Normal was being forgotten. Normal was being sidelined. Normal was being reduced to a wallet and a phone number, someone they contacted when they needed something, someone they tolerated when it was convenient, someone they loved in the abstract but not in practice. Normal was watching my life get smaller and quieter while theirs got bigger and louder, brighter and more full, expanding in every direction except toward me. I deleted the text without answering. A man at the counter glanced at me, then walked over. Older guy, maybe 70, wearing a trucker's cap and a fleece jacket that had seen better days. His face was weathered, deeply lined, the face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. "Heading home for the holiday?" he asked. I looked at him. Thought about lying. Thought about saying yes, just to end the conversation, just to avoid explaining anything. Instead, I said nothing. He nodded, like he understood something I hadn't said, some truth I was carrying that didn't need words. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I hear you." Then he walked away. I finished my coffee, threw the cup in the trash, and got back on the road. The snow had stopped, the sky was clearing, and somewhere ahead, in a city I hadn't seen in 15 years, a life I'd almost forgotten was waiting to remind me who I used to be. The regional airport was small, the kind of place where you could still see the planes from the terminal windows. 2 gates, a coffee stand that was closed for the holiday. A handful of travelers scattered across plastic chairs, staring at their phones or sleeping with their heads against their luggage. I booked a ticket on my phone while sitting in the parking lot. One way, no return date. The destination was a city I hadn't been to in 15 years, a place tied to my early career, back when I was building my reputation in oil and gas engineering, back when people listened when I talked, back when my name on a report meant something. I went through security, boarded the plane, and stared out the window as the ground fell away. The city disappeared beneath clouds. The world became small and distant, and for the first time all day, I felt something close to calm. No one called, no one texted. By the time I landed, it was late afternoon. The sky was orange and purple, the kind of winter sunset that makes everything look colder than it is. I rented a car and drove to an apartment complex on the edge of town. Company housing, technically. A place the firm kept for contractors and consultants who needed short-term accommodations. I'd made a call from the airport. One of the old guys, someone I'd worked with back in the day. His name was Vernon. He didn't ask questions. Just said the key would be under the mat. The apartment was small, clean, functional. A couch, a bed, a kitchenette. It smelled like air freshener and nothing else. The kind of place designed to be forgotten as soon as you left. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all day, I let myself think about what I was doing. I'd left. Just walked out. My daughter probably thought I was sulking, holed up at home, waiting for her to apologize. She didn't know I was halfway across the country, didn't know I'd emptied out and disappeared, but I wasn't sulking, I was deciding. I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Documents, contracts, old correspondence, things I'd kept because I'm the kind of man who keeps everything, just in case. There were agreements in there, advisory roles I'd taken on after I semi-retired, consulting contracts with firms that valued my expertise, ownership stakes in ventures I'd helped structure, back when people still came to me for my mind, not just my wallet. I'd built a career on being thorough, on understanding systems, structures, the way things fit together. I'd spent 30 years in the field, working my way up from field engineer to senior consultant. I'd designed pipelines, optimized extraction processes, solved problems that cost companies millions when they went wrong. And I'd been smart about it. I'd taken equity when it was offered. I'd kept relationships alive. I'd built a network that extended across the industry. People who respected my work, who valued my opinion, who still called me when they needed someone they could trust. I'd never talked about this with my daughter. Never mentioned the scope of what I'd built, the networks I'd maintained, the reputation I still carried in certain rooms. It didn't seem relevant. She had her life. I had mine. But maybe it was time to remind people who I was. I made a list, names, companies, contacts, people who owed me favors, or at least owed me respect. Vernon, my old site manager from the Dakota Fields, now a VP at a mid-size extraction firm. Janet, the lawyer who'd helped me structure my consulting agreements, sharp, ruthless when she needed to be. Avon, an investor I'd worked with on a joint venture that had paid out better than anyone expected. Lux, a former colleague who'd moved into corporate strategy and still asked my opinion on major decisions. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My phone buzzed. Another text from my daughter. "Dad, seriously, call me. You're worrying me." I turned off the phone and went to bed. The next morning, I woke early and drove to a law office downtown. The building was old but well-maintained, the kind of place that signaled competence without flash. Stone facade, brass nameplates, a lobby with dark wood paneling, and a receptionist who looked like she'd been there 30 years. I'd called ahead. She knew my name. "Mr. Marin, Ms. Holloway is expecting you." Janet Holloway met me in a conference room with tall windows overlooking the street. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, her gray hair cut short, her suit perfectly tailored. We'd worked together years ago on a contract dispute involving mineral rights in West Texas. She'd been ruthless then, methodical, the kind of lawyer who left nothing to chance. She remembered me. "Keaton," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "It's been a while." "It has." We sat. She poured coffee from a carafe and slid a cup across the table. The coffee was good, strong, and dark, not the watered-down office variety. "What can I do for you?" I told her. "Not everything, just enough. I needed to update some paperwork, beneficiaries, representation, legal authority over certain assets and agreements. I wanted to make sure everything was clean, documented, ironclad, no room for interpretation, no gaps that could be exploited." She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and didn't press me on why. That was one of the things I'd always appreciated about Janet. She understood that people had their reasons, and those reasons weren't always her business. "This will take a few days," she said. "Maybe a week." "That's fine. Anything else?" I hesitated. Then I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I need you to review these. Make sure there are no gaps, no vulnerabilities, no places where someone could challenge my authority or try to act without my consent." She opened the folder, scanned the first few pages, and raised an eyebrow. "You've been busy." "I've been careful." She nodded slowly, flipping through the documents. "Some of these contracts are still active. You're still on the board for 3 of these companies." "I am?" "And you want to make sure your authority is clearly documented." "Yes." "Any particular reason?" I met her eyes. "I want to make sure no one can act on my behalf without my explicit consent. And I want to make sure that when I do act, there's no question about my authority to do so." She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "I'll go through it. Every word, every clause. You'll hear from me by the end of the week." "I appreciate it." "Keaton," she said, closing the folder. "Whatever you're planning, make sure you're ready for the consequences." "I am," she smiled slightly. "Good. Because from what I'm seeing here, you have more leverage than most people realize. It would be a shame to waste it." I thanked her and left. From there, I went to the bank. A regional branch, the kind where they still knew their clients by name, where relationships mattered more than account balances. I met with a manager in a private office and made adjustments. Small things, strategic things, updated signatories, changed beneficiaries, made sure the trust structures I'd set up years ago were still intact, still enforceable. The manager, a man named Robert who'd handled my accounts for a decade, asked if everything was all right. "Just making sure things are in order," I said. He didn't push, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "These are significant changes, Mr. Marin. If you don't mind me saying, it looks like you're preparing for something." "Just being thorough." He nodded. "Well, everything looks good from our end. These changes will be processed by tomorrow morning." I backed up records, updated passwords, made sure everything I'd built over the years was protected, locked down, ready. Every account, every investment, every piece of the financial infrastructure I'd constructed over 3 decades. By the time I finished, it was late afternoon. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I checked my phone. 12 missed calls, 8 texts, all from my daughter. The most recent one read, "Dad, I'm getting really worried. Please just let me know you're okay. I'm sorry about Christmas. Can we talk?" I stared at the message. The apology felt hollow, performative, something she thought she should say rather than something she meant. I could almost hear Jenna in the background coaching her. "Just apologize. He'll come around. He always does." I didn't respond. That night, I sat in the apartment and scrolled through social media. More photos, my daughter and Bradley at a holiday party, Dressed up, holding champagne glasses, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. Kara opening presents at Jenna's house, surrounded by expensive toys and wrapping paper. A gingerbread house that must have cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Everyone smiling, everyone happy, not a single mention of me. Not even a Merry Christmas to everyone near and far. Nothing. It was like I'd never existed. I closed the app and opened my email instead. There was a message waiting, a calendar invite, a board meeting in early January. My name was listed as a participant, not just a participant, a speaker. The subject line read, Strategic Advisory Session, Q1 Planning and Asset Review. The message body included an agenda, financial forecasts, partnership evaluations, new venture proposals, and there, buried in the middle, a line item that caught my attention. Medical Device Integration Partnership, Whitmore Medical Solutions. Bradley's company. I accepted the invite and shut the laptop. Small world, I thought. Or maybe not so small. Maybe inevitable. The industry conference was held at a hotel and convention center on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of event I used to attend regularly, back when I was still active in the field. Engineers, executives, investors, people who built things, moved capital, made decisions that rippled across markets. The lobby was crowded when I arrived. People in suits clustered around registration tables, checking badges, comparing schedules, reconnecting with old colleagues. The air smelled like coffee and cologne and the faint industrial scent of new carpet. I registered at the front desk and picked up my badge. A few people recognized me, nodded, shook my hand, asked where I'd been. Consulting, I said, staying busy. It felt good to be seen again, not as someone's father, not as the quiet guy in the corner who paid for things and then disappeared, but as Keaton Marin, the man who knew his field, the man who'd built things that lasted. I attended a few panels, listened to presentations on market trends, new extraction technologies, regulatory changes. The industry had evolved since I'd stepped back, but the fundamentals remained the same. Physics didn't change. Economics didn't change. Human nature certainly didn't change. Took notes. At lunch, I sat with a group of former colleagues at a round table near the back of the banquet hall. We talked shop, projects, acquisitions. Someone mentioned a deal that had gone sideways because the technical due diligence was inadequate. Company lost $40 million on that one, a man named Richard said, shaking his head. All because they didn't catch the infrastructure problems until after they'd signed. You should have called Keaton, one of them joked. He would have caught it. Everyone laughed, but it wasn't really a joke. I would have caught it. That was what I did. You still doing consulting work? Richard asked. Some. You should talk to our VP. We've got a project in the Gulf that could use your eyes on it. Send me the details. He pulled out his phone and made a note. That afternoon, I ran into Vernon. He was standing near the coffee station, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, his face lit up. Keaton, I heard you were here. We shook hands. He looked older, grayer, but his grip was still strong. His suit was expensive, well-tailored. The VP title had been good to him. How have you been? He asked. Good. Keeping busy. You coming to the planning session next week? I am. He nodded, looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. There's going to be some movement, restructuring, new partnerships. Your name came up. In what context? Advisory capacity. Maybe more, depending on how things shake out. People remember you, Keaton. They remember what you built. The Dakota project alone is still being used as a case study in efficiency optimization. I nodded slowly. Good to know. We need people we can trust, people who know their stuff, who aren't afraid to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You fit that bill better than anyone I know. Appreciate it. He clapped me on the shoulder. Good to have you back. Seriously, the industry needs more people like you. We talked for a few more minutes about mutual acquaintances, projects we'd worked on together, changes in the regulatory landscape. Then he had to run to a meeting, and I was left standing alone with my coffee. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Valued, respected, seen. That evening, I went back to my room and opened my laptop. Janet had sent an email. Everything was in order. The documents were ready. All I had to do was sign. I read through them carefully, page by page, clause by clause, making sure I understood exactly what I was authorizing, exactly what authority I was claiming, exactly what protections I was putting in place. When I was satisfied, I signed. The next morning, I put on a suit. Not the one I wore to weddings and funerals, the good one. Charcoal gray, Italian wool, custom-tailored 15 years ago, and still in perfect condition because I'd taken care of it. The one I used to wear when I walked into rooms full of people who controlled billions of dollars and needed someone to tell them the truth. I drove to a building downtown, modern glass and steel, security desk in the lobby. I gave my name, showed my ID, and was waved through. The meeting was on the 14th floor, a boardroom with a long table, leather chairs, and a view of the city. There were 6 people already seated when I walked in. Vernon was one of them, so was Avon, the investor I'd worked with years ago. The others I recognized but hadn't worked with directly. Vernon stood and shook my hand. "Keaton, good to see you." Likewise. I took a seat. Someone poured water. Someone else handed out folders. The room had that particular energy that comes before important decisions get made. Anticipation, calculation, everyone trying to read everyone else. For the next 2 hours, we talked strategy, asset allocation, risk management, new ventures, market positioning, competitive advantages. I contributed when it made sense, stayed quiet when it didn't. By the end, 3 of the people at the table had asked if I'd be willing to consult on their projects. I said I'd consider it. When the meeting ended, Vernon pulled me aside. "You still have it," he said. "Have what?" "The touch. People trust you. They listen when you talk. That's rare." I nodded. "I appreciate that." "You thinking about coming back full-time?" "Maybe. We'll see." He smiled. "Let me know. We could use you. And between you and me, there are some opportunities coming up that would be perfect for someone with your background." "What kind of opportunities?" "Board positions, strategic advisory roles, the kind that come with real influence, real compensation." He paused. "You've earned it, Keaton. Time to claim it." That night, I checked my phone. More texts from my daughter, more calls, one voicemail. I listened to it. Her voice was strained. "Dad, I don't know what's going on, but you're scaring me. Please call me back. I'm sorry if you're upset about Christmas. We should have included you. I know that. Bradley feels terrible, too. Just, please call me. Let me know you're okay. Kara keeps asking where you are." The mention of Kara stung, but I knew it was manipulation. If Kara was really asking, my daughter would have put her on the phone, would have let me hear her voice. I saved the voicemail and didn't respond. New Year's came and went. I spent it alone in the apartment, watching the local broadcast, drinking a beer I didn't finish. The celebration felt distant, hollow. People on the screen cheering, kissing, celebrating the turning of the calendar as if changing a date changed anything fundamental about their lives. I watched it all with the detachment of someone observing a ritual that no longer applied to them. My daughter stopped texting, stopped calling. The silence was sudden, complete. I assumed she'd decided I was being dramatic, that I'd come around eventually, that this was just me being stubborn, the way I'd always been when I felt slighted. "Give him a few days," she probably told Bradley. "He'll get over it." She didn't know where I was, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know I'd spent the past week rebuilding connections or reviewing contracts, positioning myself in rooms where decisions got made and fortunes shifted. On January 2nd, I received an email, an official notice, the quarterly board meeting for one of the firms I held advisory shares in. The agenda included asset review, leadership evaluation, and strategic planning for the next fiscal year. My name was listed under key contributors. I confirmed my attendance. The meeting was scheduled for January 7th, 5 days away. I used that time to prepare, reviewed financials line by line, studied market reports, made notes on industry trends, competitive positioning, regulatory exposure, analyzed the partnership proposals that would be up for discussion. I wasn't walking into that room unprepared. On the morning of the 6th, I got a call from Avon, the investor. "Keaton, just wanted to give you a heads up. Tomorrow's meeting is going to be interesting." "How so?" "There's talk of expanding the board, bringing in new advisory members. Your name keeps coming up." "Who's pushing for it?" "Vernon, mostly. But others are on board. You've got a reputation, Keaton. People remember the Dakota Project. They remember the work you did in Texas, the New Mexico extraction optimization. You're solid, reliable, and in this industry, that's worth more than flash. Appreciate the call. One more thing, there's a complication." I waited. "One of the firms we're partnering with is run by a guy named Bradley Whitmore. You know him?" My chest tightened. "I know him." "Thought you might. He's married to someone, right? Your daughter?" "Yes." Avon was quiet for a moment. Small world. "It is." "This going to be a problem?" "No. You sure? Because if there's a conflict of interest, we need to know now. There's no conflict. Bradley's company does medical device sales. I have expertise in industrial engineering and energy sector optimization. Our professional spheres don't overlap. Fair enough, but you should know he's presenting a partnership proposal tomorrow. Integration of our sensor technology into his medical monitoring devices. It's a significant deal, potentially very lucrative. I'll review it objectively. That's all I'm asking. He paused. You sure you're okay with this? I'm sure, he exhaled. All right. See you tomorrow. I hung up and stared at the wall. Bradley. Of course, I hadn't known he was involved in this, hadn't connected the dots. But now that I thought about it, it made sense. His company sold medical devices. This firm had been exploring healthcare applications for some of their sensor technologies. A partnership would have been logical, maybe even inevitable. And now I was walking into a room where Bradley would be sitting across the table from me, pitching a deal, asking for approval from a board that included his father-in-law. The father-in-law he'd helped erase from family life. The father-in-law who was now in a position to evaluate his professional competence. I smiled. The universe had a sense of irony. The boardroom was on the 18th floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A table that could seat 20. Coffee and pastries set out on a side table. The view stretched across the city, buildings and streets laid out in geometric precision. I arrived early. Vernon was already there, along with 2 others. We exchanged pleasantries. Poured coffee, took seats. The small talk was easy, comfortable. People who knew each other, who'd worked together, who spoke the same language. Over the next 10 minutes, the room filled. Executives, advisors, legal counsel, each person bringing their own agenda, their own priorities, their own calculations. And then, at 9:03, Bradley walked in. He was wearing a tailored suit, carrying a leather portfolio, looking confident and composed. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy shaking hands, smiling, making small talk with the people near the door, the performance of confidence, the social dance he was so good at. Then he turned, and our eyes met. He froze, just for a second, just long enough for me to see the recognition, the confusion, the flicker of something that might have been panic. His smile faltered. His hand, halfway extended towards someone else, dropped slightly. Then he recovered, walked over, extended his hand. Keaton, I didn't know you'd be here. I shook his hand. Firm grip, professional. Bradley, this is unexpected. Is it? He laughed, but it sounded forced, hollow. I mean, I knew you did some consulting, but I didn't realize you were involved with this firm. I've been involved for a while. He nodded slowly, and I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, trying to figure out what this meant, trying to figure out if I was here because of him, if this was some kind of setup, if the universe was conspiring against him. How's my daughter? I asked. He blinked. She's good. She's been worried about you. I'm sure. You should call her. Maybe. Before he could respond, Vernon called the meeting to order. Everyone took their seats. Bradley ended up 3 chairs down from me on the opposite side of the table, far enough that we weren't sitting next to each other, close enough that I could see his face clearly. The meeting began with routine business, financial reports, quarterly performance, market analysis, numbers on spreadsheets, projections, and forecasts. I listened, took notes, didn't speak. Then the conversation shifted to partnerships, new ventures, strategic alliances. Vernon introduced the proposal, a collaboration with Bradley's firm, integration of sensor technology into medical monitoring devices, projected revenue in the tens of millions over 5 years, a significant opportunity if executed properly. Bradley presented the details. He was good at it, confident, articulate. He had slides, data, projected ROI, charts showing market penetration, competitive advantages, revenue timelines. It was a solid pitch. Professional, well-researched. When he finished, the room was quiet. People nodded. A few asked questions. Bradley answered them smoothly, referring to specific data points, citing industry standards, demonstrating knowledge. Then Vernon turned to me. Keaton, you've been quiet. What do you think? I set down my pen, looked at Bradley, then at Vernon. The technology is sound, I said. The market analysis is reasonable, but the partnership structure has vulnerabilities. Bradley's smile faltered. Vulnerabilities? Your firm doesn't have exclusive rights to the distribution channels you're citing. You're assuming cooperation from third-party logistics providers who have no contractual obligation to prioritize your product. If they shift focus, your timelines collapse. The room was silent. Bradley recovered quickly. We've had preliminary conversations with those providers. They're interested. Interested isn't binding. True, and your cost projections don't account for regulatory delays. FDA approval for integrated medical devices can take 18 to 24 months, not the 12 you've outlined. That's a significant gap. He stared at me. We've budgeted for contingencies. Have you budgeted for a 2-year delay? Because that's what you're looking at if the FDA flags any of your sensor integrations as high risk, which they will, given the invasive monitoring capabilities you're proposing. One of the other board members leaned forward. Is that likely? I nodded. It's standard procedure for Class 3 devices. The approval process is exhaustive, and if there are any safety concerns, any questions about data privacy, any issues with biocompatibility, it can extend indefinitely. Vernon looked at Bradley. Did you factor that in? Bradley's jaw tightened. We based our timeline on industry averages. Industry averages don't account for novel technology, I said, which is what you're proposing. Novel integration requires novel evaluation. The FDA doesn't have established protocols for this kind of sensor-device combination. They'll have to create them. That takes time. Another board member spoke up. What about the distribution issue? Is that a real concern? It is, I said. Third-party logistics providers operate on volume and margin. If a competitor offers them better terms, they'll shift priority. Without contractual guarantees, you're vulnerable. Vernon leaned back in his chair. Keaton, what would you recommend? I glanced at Bradley, then back at Vernon. Renegotiate the terms, include penalty clauses for timeline overruns, require binding agreements with logistics providers before we commit capital, and build in a longer approval window, 2 years minimum with contingencies for 3. One of the other board members nodded. That's reasonable, another chimed in. Agreed. We can't afford to tie up capital on optimistic timelines. Bradley's face was tight. Those changes would push the project back 6 months, maybe more. Better 6 months now than 18 months of losses later, I said. Vernon looked around the table. Show of hands. Who supports Keaton's recommendations? 6 hands went up, including Avon's. Vernon turned to Bradley. Looks like we'll need to revisit the proposal. Bradley nodded stiffly. Understood. The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. Bradley's confidence was gone. He answered questions mechanically, his voice flat. When people asked for clarification, he fumbled through his notes, losing his place, repeating himself. The smooth performance had cracked. By the time the meeting ended, the room felt colder. People filed out. I stayed seated, gathering my notes. Bradley approached. His face was tight, controlled. That was unnecessary, he said quietly. Was it? You torpedoed my deal. I pointed out flaws. If your deal can't survive scrutiny, that's not my problem. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. This is about Christmas, isn't it? I looked at him. This has nothing to do with Christmas. Then why? I'm here because I was invited, because I have a fiduciary responsibility to this board, because it's my job to make sure we don't lose money on bad deals. That's it. He stared at me, and I could see him trying to decide if I was lying. Then Vernon called my name from across the room. Keaton, you got a minute? I stood, picked up my folder, looked at Bradley one last time. Tell my daughter I said hello. I walked away. Vernon wanted to talk about the advisory role. He took me to a quiet office down the hall, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the desk. The room was smaller than the boardroom, more intimate. A few framed certificates on the wall. A bookshelf filled with industry publications and technical manuals. That was good work in there, he said. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than that. You saw problems no one else caught. That's exactly why we need you. Need me for what? He smiled. We're expanding, bringing in new talent, new perspectives. We want you on the board, not as an advisor, as a full member, voting rights, strategic input, the whole package. I didn't respond immediately. It's a significant role, he continued. Compensation package is competitive. Base retainer of $120,000 annually, plus equity options, full benefits, performance bonuses tied to company growth, and you'd have real influence, real authority, the kind you used to have before you stepped back. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Take a look. The terms are all outlined here. We're not just looking for someone to show up to quarterly meetings. We want strategic leadership, someone who can guide major decisions, someone the other board members respect. I opened the folder, scanned the first page. The numbers were better than I'd expected. The equity options alone could be worth millions if the company continued its trajectory. Why me? I asked. Because you're good, because people trust you, and because we need someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. especially when it's uncomfortable. He paused. What you did in there with Bradley's proposal? That's exactly what we need. Someone who sees past the presentation, past the optimism, straight to the structural problems. I thought about what it would mean, about stepping back into this world fully, not just as a consultant on the margins, but as a decision maker at the center of things. There's another reason, Vernon said. We're looking at some major acquisitions over the next 18 months. Energy sector consolidation, new extraction technologies, international partnerships, the kind of moves that require someone with deep technical knowledge and field experience. That's you. What kind of acquisitions? Can't say yet. Still in early stages, but big. Industry-changing big. He leaned forward. You'd be part of those conversations from the beginning, helping shape the strategy, evaluating the targets, making sure we don't make expensive mistakes. I looked at the folder again, at the terms, at the scope of what he was offering. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. We're making moves in the next 2 weeks. Board vote is scheduled for the 15th. I need to know if you're in. I'll let you know by the end of the week. He nodded. Good enough. He stood, extended his hand. For what it's worth, Keaton, I hope you say yes. The industry's changed a lot since you stepped back. Not always for the better. We need people who remember how things are supposed to be done. I shook his hand. Appreciate the confidence. It's not confidence, it's fact. You've earned this. I left the building and drove back to the apartment. The sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and pink and deep purple. The temperature was dropping. I could see my breath when I got out of the car. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the hollow purpose of being needed for money or favors. Not the diminished purpose of being someone's backup plan. But real purpose. The kind that comes from being valued for what you know, what you can do, what you bring to the table. That night, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But I looked at the screen and saw it was my daughter. I picked up. Dad. Her voice was tight, controlled. More tense than the voicemails had been. Bradley called me. Did he? He said you were at his meeting today. That you challenged his proposal. That you basically destroyed it in front of everyone. I pointed out problems with the structure. He said you humiliated him. I did my job. If he felt humiliated, that's his interpretation. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her pacing in her kitchen, the way she always did when she was upset. Why would you do that? Because the proposal had problems. Problems that couldn't wait? Problems you had to bring up right there, in front of his colleagues, in front of potential partners? Yes, that's how board meetings work. You evaluate proposals, you identify risks, you make informed decisions. This is because of Christmas, isn't it? I closed my eyes. This has nothing to do with Christmas. Then what? You just happened to be at Bradley's meeting? You just happened to be on that board? That's too much of a coincidence, Dad. I've been on that board for 3 years. I hold advisory shares in the company. I have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the interests of the shareholders. Bradley's proposal put those interests at risk. You're being unreasonable. Am I? You canceled Christmas without warning, didn't invite me, didn't even feel bad about it, posted pictures online like I didn't exist. And now you're mad because I didn't sit quietly while your husband pitched a flawed deal. That's not fair. Isn't it? She was quiet. Then her voice changed, harder. You need to apologize to Bradley. No. Dad. I'm not apologizing for doing my job. If Bradley can't handle professional criticism, that's his problem, not mine. He's my husband, and I'm your father, but that doesn't seem to matter much anymore, does it? The words hung in the air. I heard her sharp intake of breath. What is that supposed to mean? It means I've spent the last 6 years watching myself disappear from your life, from Kara's life. It means I've paid for things, helped when you needed it, shown up when I was told to, and been erased anyway. It means I'm tired of being optional. You're not optional. Really? When was the last time you invited me to something that mattered? Not as an afterthought, not as a backup, but because you actually wanted me there? She didn't answer. I didn't think so. This is different. This is Bradley's career. And my presence in your life isn't important enough to protect, but his career is? Is that what you're telling me? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Another long silence. Then, I don't know who you are right now. I'm the same person I've always been. You just stopped paying attention. That's not true. Isn't it? You don't know what I do for work. You don't know where I am right now. You didn't even notice I'd left town until Bradley called you, upset that I was at his meeting. When was the last time you asked me about my life?" "Really asked?" She didn't respond. "I thought so." "You're being unfair." "No, I'm being honest. For the first time in years." I could hear her breathing getting faster. Anger or tears, I couldn't tell. "Mom would be so disappointed in you right now." The words hit like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't use your mother like that." "It's true. She'd hate what you're doing. Using your position to hurt Bradley, abandoning your family on Christmas." "I didn't abandon anyone. I was canceled. There's a difference." "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" "You sent me a text at 7:47 in the morning on Christmas Day telling me not to come. You posted pictures an hour later showing how happy you were without me. You didn't call, didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge that it might hurt. That's not drama, that's fact." She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. "I said I was sorry, in my text. I said we'd make it up to you. You said maybe next week. That's not an apology. That's a dismissal. What do you want from me?" "I want you to see me, really see me, not as a wallet, not as a babysitter, not as someone who exists to make your life easier, but as a person, as your father." "I do see you." "No, you don't. But maybe after today, after Bradley tells you what happened in that boardroom, you'll start to understand that I'm more than you thought I was." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I need you to fix this." "Fix what?" "Whatever you did to Bradley's deal. I need you to call Vernon or whoever and tell them you made a mistake, that you were wrong about the problems." I almost laughed. I wasn't wrong. Then lie. "No. Dad, please. This deal is important. It could make Bradley's career. We need this." "You need it. Bradley needs it. But that doesn't make it a good deal for the company. And I'm not going to compromise my professional integrity because you're asking me to. So that's it? Your pride is more important than your family?" "This isn't about pride. It's about doing what's right. And what's right is making sure that company doesn't lose money on a poorly structured partnership." "I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're asking me to." She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. But underneath the pain, underneath the anger, there was something else. Clarity. For the first time in years, I'd told the truth. All of it, and I hadn't apologized for it. The next week was a blur. Meetings, calls, paperwork. Vernon formally offered me the board position, and I accepted. The announcement went out the following Monday. My name appeared on press releases, in industry newsletters, on the company website. People reached out. Congratulations. Welcome back. Good to have you on board. My daughter didn't call. Bradley didn't call, but Jenna did. I was in a coffee shop when my phone rang. I saw her name and almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jenna." "Keaton." Her voice was ice. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About what you're doing to this family." I almost laughed. "What I'm doing?" "You've put Bradley in an impossible position. You've embarrassed him in front of his colleagues, and now my daughter is caught in the middle of whatever grudge you're nursing." "I'm not nursing a grudge." "Then what do you call this?" "I call it business. This isn't business. This is revenge." I set down my coffee. "Jenna, I didn't ask to be excluded from Christmas. I didn't ask to be erased from my granddaughter's life. I didn't ask to be treated like I don't matter, but that's what happened. And now I'm doing what I should have done years ago. I'm living my life. I'm doing my work. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem." "You're being selfish." "No, I'm being honest. For the first time in years." She was quiet. Then, "If you keep this up, you'll lose them." "I already lost them. I just didn't realize it until now." I hung up. That afternoon, I got an email. The final board meeting before the fiscal quarter ended. The agenda included final approval of partnerships, budget allocations, and leadership appointments. Bradley's revised proposal was on the list. The meeting was scheduled for January 14th, 1 week away. I confirmed my attendance and started preparing. The 14th arrived cold and clear. I woke at 5, as always, and spent an hour reviewing my notes. By the time I left the apartment, I had everything memorized: numbers, projections, risk assessments, contingency plans. I drove to the high-rise. The city was quiet, the streets empty. I parked in the garage and took the elevator to the 18th floor. The boardroom was already filling when I arrived. Vernon, Avon, the others. and Bradley, sitting near the far end of the table, his face unreadable. I took my seat, poured water, opened my folder. Vernon called the meeting to order. The first hour was routine: financial reports, performance metrics, budget reviews. I listened, made notes, asked a few clarifying questions. Then we reached partnerships. Vernon introduced Bradley's revised proposal. The timeline had been extended. The logistics agreements were now binding. The regulatory windows had been expanded to account for potential delays. It was solid, professional, well-constructed. Bradley presented it calmly, methodically. He'd learned from the last meeting. He anticipated questions, addressed concerns before they were raised, provided documentation for every claim. His voice was steady, confident without being arrogant. When he finished, Vernon looked around the table. Questions? No one spoke. Keaton? I looked at the proposal, at the numbers, at the structure. It was good, better than good. He'd done the work. I nodded. It's solid. The revisions address the concerns I raised. I support it. Bradley's eyes widened slightly, like he hadn't expected that. Vernon smiled. All in favor? Every hand went up. Motion passes. Congratulations, Bradley. Bradley nodded, but he was looking at me. There was something in his expression. Not gratitude, not relief, something closer to understanding. The meeting continued. New business, strategic planning, and then, near the end, Vernon cleared his throat. One more item. As you all know, we've been restructuring the board. We've brought Keaton Marin on as a full member, effective immediately. Applause around the table. Vernon continued. Keaton brings decades of experience, a proven track record, and the kind of strategic insight we need as we move into the next phase of growth. We're fortunate to have him. More applause. I nodded, accepting it. Then Vernon said, Keaton, do you want to say a few words? I hadn't prepared anything, but I stood anyway. I appreciate the confidence you've all placed in me, I said. I've spent my career building things that last, systems, structures, relationships. That's what I intend to bring to this board. I don't make decisions lightly, I don't act impulsively, but when I commit to something, I commit fully. And I expect the same from everyone I work with. I'm here because I believe in what we're building, and I'm here to make sure we build it right. I looked around the table, at Vernon, at Avon, at the others, then at Bradley. I don't have patience for shortcuts. I don't have patience for careless work, but I have endless respect for people who do their jobs well, who take criticism seriously, who come back stronger. I paused. That's what separates professionals from amateurs, and this board deserves professionals. I sat down. The room was silent for a moment. Then Vernon nodded. Well said. The meeting adjourned. People gathered their things, shook hands, made small talk. I stayed seated, organizing my notes. Bradley approached. He stood there for a moment, like he wasn't sure what to say. Then, thank you for supporting the proposal. I looked up. It was a good proposal. I know you didn't have to. No, I didn't. He nodded slowly. I told my wife what you said, about doing your job. She didn't like it. I imagine not. But I understood it. He paused. I don't think I've ever seen you like this. At family dinners, you were always so quiet. I thought you were just, I don't know, not interested. I was interested. You just never asked. He absorbed that. What happens now? Now, you do your work. I do mine. We're professionals. That's how this works. And Christmas? What about it? Are you coming back? To the family? I looked at him for a long moment. I never left. You just stopped seeing me. He didn't have an answer for that. Vernon caught me in the hallway. That was one hell of a speech. Just the truth. You planning to stick around? Really commit to this? I looked back at the boardroom, at the table, at the view of the city stretching out beyond the windows. Yeah, I said. I am. Vernon smiled. Good. We need you. He paused. You know, when you first disappeared after Christmas, I thought maybe you'd finally retired for real. But this is who you are. This is where you belong. Maybe. Not maybe, definitely. He clapped me on the shoulder. Welcome back, Keaton. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. My phone buzzed, a text from my daughter. Bradley told me what you said in the meeting, about professionals, about doing work right. Dad, I think I'm starting to understand. Can we talk? I stared at the message. Then I put the phone away. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, and as they closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. A man in a good suit, clear-eyed, purposeful, not erased, not optional, not forgotten. Keaton Marin. The doors closed, the elevator descended, and when it reached the lobby, I walked out into the cold January air, got in my car, and drove toward the future I'd just reclaimed.